Hey everybody, we are doing a part 2 just because you guys had so many good answers of our favorite movie endings and why. But first, of course, I will plug my website. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that's something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website, or if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can email me. My email is in the description box below. Okay, so the first one. Nashville's ending always strikes me as the perfect encapsulation of the resilience of humanity, for better or worse. These fucked up creatures called humans just keep a-going. One star falls tragically and another desperate soul picks up the thread and sews a sonic tapestry that's a strange catharsis for the moment and possibly even the whole beautiful, empathetic human comedy at large. I feel like you've said it all so eloquently, really kind of summed up, I think, sort of the philosophy behind Altman and Nashville in particular. I love that film. I think it's a fabulous film. It's been a really long time since I've seen it, but I did feel like it was a really intricately woven ensemble, as you know, most of the great Altman films are, but really kind of reflecting the zeitgeist, the American sort of consciousness at the time, but it, you know, certainly resonates today. And as you say, it's the idea of the human condition that is so haunting about it. There will be blood. While the entire scene is fantastic, including some of the best acting in the whole film, just the final bit gets to me. Daniel makes Eli confess his subconscious as he did to him in the church, but that's not enough. He can't destroy Eli's spirit. He only needs more. Just like with the rest of the film, Daniel is never satisfied with getting in the last word or anything of that sort. He needs to thoroughly destroy all those who stand in the way of his insatiable greed. So as Eli cowardly tries to run and begs for mercy, Daniel takes great pleasure in beating away at his life until he is finally satisfied, ending with the haunting line, "I'm finished." Yes, There Will Be Blood is, I think, one of the great endings of an American film of the 21st century. Without question, it is my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film. I've talked about it so many times, but yes, the ending is one of the great things about it. And I think when it originally came out, people were a little split on it. Some people really, really responded to it. Other people were a little bit confused by it tonally. I would say, for me, I think just the humor of the whole film is what's so great about it. It is quite eccentric and quite discordant, but always keeps that sense of humor. It always has a kind of a bird's eye view, Paul Thomas Anderson, or, you know, he's very kind of disconnected to a degree from his characters, especially when they get into all of these ridiculous sort of tiffs and it becomes cartoony. The battle between this like capitalist power and this religious power, not really realizing that they're pretty much the same sort of idea, and yet fighting like primates. And really, when you watch the film all the way through it, there's so much about it that does remind one of 2001: A Space Odyssey, or just, you know, Kubrick films in general, that sort of disconnect. And obviously, Kubrick was known for that sort of bird's eye view, always very kind of cold representation of humans, almost as though it's a lab experiment. And in that final moment, as you say so beautifully here, yes, I mean, it is a representation of the extremes that we'll go to, that push us practically into the level of farce. I mean, really, in that scene, it is just practically kabuki theater, as I like to say. It is just balls to the wall. You have Daniel Day-Lewis literally dancing at a certain point. It's fantastic. And of course, what you describe here so wonderfully at the very end, where he's beating him senselessly with the bowling pin, and it's kind of that low angle. It's very reminiscent of that famous shot with the bone in 2001, you know, where it's just like, you know, beating the animal to death and then throwing it up into the air. And really how there's not that much difference between, you know, what is very primal and archaic and what is existing now. We really don't change that much. Just kind of the social environment sort of waters everything down, but really all of it is seething beneath the surface, and There Will Be Blood for me captures that brilliantly. Memento's ending, I love it because it's such a mic drop of an ending. It takes the whole plot of the story and flips it on its head. You thought the main protagonist was your hero, but it turns out he's not just a hero, and he is the murderer of his own wife. It establishes the themes the movie goes for and pulls the rug out from underneath the audience. Perfect ending. Yeah, that is a really good, I'd say, mic drop of an ending, as you say there. It works really, really well just kind of in a in that gotcha sort of way, absolutely, but done very, very tastefully. I really like Memento. I think it's very, very well done, obviously very well constructed, and I think there's a real sophistication in kind of planting those clues, kind of like stabs of a bed sheet or something like that, just real kind of blinks, and then it all adds up in the end. And it's not until you watch it a second time that it fully makes sense, I think. The line where he says, like, now, where was I? That's the one that I think is really chilling. Just because, the meaning of something and then without context, kind of the power of that. I think it really says a lot about just filmmaking in general as well. That said, and I've talked about this, I feel like a lot, but I am tough on Memento just because I think it is so good. I think it really could have been a masterpiece. But it fell a little bit short, and I think it's because it relies a little bit too much on those gimmicks that you say here. So even though it really does, yes, it feels like a mic drop, it also does feel like a very much a gotcha sort of thing. And there is a thinness, I think, to the characters and a little bit to the themes that I wish had been more complex. I think it would invite more repeated viewings, because as it stands, it's a very clever gimmick with kind of a reversal of narrative. But beyond that, I think I was maybe wanting a little bit more. But of course, it was early in Nolan's career, and I think he's improved upon it maybe sometimes. But I genuinely think my favorite might be the ending to The Holy Mountain. The entire film builds you up to this idea of discovering the meaning of life and then makes you feel like a fool for thinking you could get such an easy answer to that. Instead, ushering you to live your life and discover it for yourself rather than listen to the things people tell you in movies, which is honestly a more meaningful piece of advice in life than anything else Jodorowsky could have said with it. I think you make a really good case, and yes, I absolutely adore the ending to that film. It's fantastic. It's a really kind of cheeky, kind of fun, makes you smile sort of thing. And when you're watching the film, the whole film does have a very, it has a very gimmicky sort of thing, so it has to rely on a gimmick like that, which is, very specific and very clear, very on the nose. And some might say a little bit too on the nose, but I think in the context of the film, it really does work. It really gets the humor of it, absolutely. And I remember the first time I saw the film, I thought the only way that this can end is if you can just kind of break the fourth wall of the entire idea behind the movie. It's the only way to kind of pierce through to really, give us a satisfying conclusion. And honestly, I can't help but, as you say here, I can't help but really just love the message of it. I know that I go on here and I do a lot of movie reviews and people just think that's my whole life, but no, I am a firm believer of getting away from it. I really, I think filmmaking is really wonderful, and it's wonderful to experience, to inspire, even help you understand, bits about the world and your life. But at the same time, I think you learn way more about that ultimately by going out into the world and experiencing things, having adventures. So I tend to be more of a proponent of that first and foremost. And I like that message, and I really like the philosophy, behind The Holy Mountain and Jodorowsky just in general, hence why I like it so much. Bicycle Thieves, pure heartbreak. The image of Bruno looking up at his father after he tries to steal the bike is seared into my mind. Italian neorealist films seem to make me feel more emotion than anything else. Me too. I'm not a big emotional type person with movies, especially movies that are really gut-wrenching in this sort of way. And I don't know why that is. I tend to be more, just more affected, I think, by more abstract, more artistic things that are subtextual rather than more realistic things. Just the way that my mind works. However, there's something about the bleakness, the barrenness, yet this intimate kind of fragility that is the human experience that somehow Italian neorealism can capture very well. And I think Bicycle Thieves, for me, is probably one of the best neorealist films I've seen. And I know exactly what you're talking about. There's just a sense of desperation. Every moment something is happening to these characters that is hindering them in a serious way, and they can't do anything about it. And that father and son dynamic, obviously wanting to be the provider for your son and not being able to do that, is a heartbreaking thing, but just the desperation in the end of doing something in front of your son that you would obviously tell them not to do. And those sorts of things, I think, are rarely explored in this way, especially in a climactic moment like that. What do you do when you have to do certain things that you know that you shouldn't in front of your family? I cried as well during that scene, absolutely. And I like that the film just ends in a way it's not devastating, but it's not really uplifting either. It just kind of leaves it in a way that feels very realistic. Whiplash's ending has such a strong ebb and flow to it that uses hardly any dialogue to sum up its themes brilliantly. Absolutely. I love the ending to Whiplash, even though it's all kind of built on something that is maybe really kind of melodramatic and cartoonish. That works for me. Watching that scene, Damien Chazelle really understands music and he understands how to interpret it visually. Hence why I thought, oh, he should do musicals. And of course he did La La Land and did, pretty well with that one. But I prefer Whiplash and I prefer that ending, I think, over anything else in the film. And the whole film is very, very cinematic in style, very much kind of an adrenaline rush sort of experience. But yes, the way it all comes together. The first time that I saw it, I felt myself feeling like, this has a sort of choreography to the camera movements that reminds me of Raging Bull in a lot of the fight scenes that are in that movie, because each one is filmed in a different way, but in a way that feels very kind of poetic. Like everything is more realistic outside of those sequences. And with Whiplash, it does. It feels like a big boxing match or something that is being filmed by someone like Martin Scorsese. And it does feel like that. Even though it is music, there is a grit and a physicality to it, and that strange sort of dynamic. I did watch it recently, and I found myself kind of, when he's doing the drums and going slower and slower and building it up, and how Fletcher's going like this, there's almost like a sexual sort of climactic feeling there that I found to be kind of interesting. But yes, absolutely. It encapsulates all the themes really well and doesn't need to have some sort of, typical conclusion to things, just ends on that final note of music. I think pretty succinct. When I was a little kid, the ending of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I was so used to the bad guys dying at the end of the movies. So when it did that abrupt smash cut to black, I didn't realize how on the edge I'd been the whole time. My shoulders dropped. It was instant relief, and it made me fall forever in love with the nihilistic conclusions. Absolutely, yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not any of the new ones, the original one is the effective one. And I find to be by far the most unrelenting, the most brutal, just in the feel of it. Not necessarily what you see, but the feel of it. I think it's very, very bold. And it certainly has a lot of those art house touches. But yes, there is something extremely menacing about that ending. I don't know why that is. I can't really describe what it makes me feel. Obviously you have the girl covered in blood driving away or in the back of the trunk, and she's laughing and crying almost like in this ecstasy of realizing that survival. But seeing Leatherface just kind of slashing almost like a dance, almost like he's in this weird sort of, yes, it's frustration because the victim got away, which sucks, but there's almost this strange sort of glee and abandonment to it. Like, even though it's like a dark situation for him, there's something where you sense power. That feeling of just the sound effect in particular of that saw just going. And in that moment, it just builds and builds and builds, and suddenly it's over. And yes, you realize, whoa, like I've just been in this very dark place throughout this movie, and suddenly it's over. And I think every time I watch it, I always imagine what it must have been like at the time, because I can imagine this movie coming out and being like really, kind of shocking to some people, perhaps brutal for some people, and having that ending and suddenly go to black. I can see that being really, really jarring, and almost being one of those moments where it's like, yeah, life is different than it was. We're in a very different world where our entertainment is going to reflect more the cynicism of the world, and here we are, and there's something, yes, very bleak and very haunting about that, but there's also something very visceral and intensely powerful and alluring that creates a lot of those gray areas. But that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to give a shout out to my patrons as always. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you are interested in becoming a patron, the link to support that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.